The morning of September 18th, 1944, near Lunéville, France, Oberleutnant Hans Pfeiffer sat in the commander's cupola of his Panther Ausf, G, scanning the autumn landscape through Zeiss optics. His tank, number 231, belonged to the 5th Panzer Army's 11th Panzer Division. The engine idled, a low rumble that Pfeiffer had learned to read like a heartbeat. Normal, steady. His crew had been fighting Americans for 3 months. They knew the enemy tanks. They knew what to expect. Through the trees ahead, movement, American armour advancing along the roadway toward Arracourt. Pfeiffer counted turrets. Shermans, at least 6, possibly 8 in column formation. Standard M4 mediums with the familiar rounded turret profile and squat 75mm gun. He had faced these tanks dozens of times since Normandy. The mathematics were simple and brutal. The Panther's 75mm K-42 gun could penetrate Sherman armour from 2,000 metres. The Sherman's 75 could barely scratch a Panther's frontal plate, even at point-blank range. German tank commanders called engagements like this turkey shoots. Pfeiffer ordered his gunner to prepare for action. The Panther's turret turned smoothly, hydraulic traverse bringing the long gun barrel onto target. Range 1,700 metres. The Americans hadn't spotted them yet. Standard procedure dictated waiting until the lead Sherman reached optimal kill range, then systematically destroying the column from front to rear, trapping them on the road. But something was wrong. Pfeiffer's gunner, Unteroffizier Schmidt, a veteran who had fought in Russia before transferring west, hesitated. The lead Sherman's turret looked different, longer. The gun barrel extended farther than the standard 75mm. Schmidt called out the observation. Herr Oberleutnant, that's not a regular Sherman. The turret is taller, the gun is longer. Pfeiffer studied the lead tank through magnification. Schmidt was correct. This Sherman mounted a gun significantly longer than the standard model. Intelligence briefings had mentioned new American tank variants appearing in limited numbers since July. Longer guns, higher velocity. But the briefing said these new Shermans posed no significant threat to Panthers or Tigers. The penetration performance remained inadequate against German heavy armour. The Americans were wasting resources trying to upgrade an obsolete design. The range closed to 1,500 metres. Pfeiffer gave the engagement order. Schmidt centred the reticle on the lead Sherman's hull, accounting for range and the tank's forward movement. The Panther's gun fired. The 88mm APCBC round streaked down range at 790 metres per second. Impact. The Sherman lurched, smoke billowing from the engine compartment. The crew bailed out immediately, knowing their tank was finished. The American column scattered. Shermans broke formation, some reversing desperately, others attempting to flank through the tree line. Textbook response to ambush. Pfeiffer's Panther engaged the second Sherman. Another hit. Another kill. 2. Burning American tanks in under 30 seconds. The remaining Shermans were withdrawing now, reversing at full speed, their commanders recognizing they faced a Panther and lacked the firepower to engage frontally with any hope of survival. Then the unexpected happened. One Sherman, instead of withdrawing, accelerated forward. The tank surged from the tree line at perhaps 30 kilometers per hour, turret traversing, seeking a target. It was one of the long gun variants. The American commander was either suicidally brave or tactically brilliant, choosing aggression over retreat, closing range to where even inadequate guns might find vulnerable spots. Schmidt tracked the approaching Sherman. Range now 1,100 metres and closing rapidly. Pfeiffer ordered fire. The Panther's gun roared. The shot struck the Sherman's glacis plate at a shallow angle and ricocheted skyward, a brilliant yellow spark against grey armour. The Sherman kept coming, range 900 metres. Schmidt fired again. This time the round struck the turret front. Another ricochet. Pfeiffer heard the distinctive crack of an incoming round travelling at high velocity, a sound fundamentally different from the lower velocity 75mm shells they'd grown accustomed to. The round struck the Panther's frontal armour below the gun mantlet. Pfeiffer felt the impact through the hull, a tremendous sledgehammer blow that rang through the fighting compartment like a bell. His first thought was relief. The armour had held. Panthers could absorb punishment from American 75mm guns all day. The glacis plate was 80mm thick at 55 degrees of slope, creating effective thickness exceeding 140mm. No American tank gun in service could penetrate that protection frontally. Then Schmidt screamed. Not pain, but shock. The armour penetrated. The round penetrated. Pfeiffer looked down. A neat hole, perhaps 30mm in diameter, had appeared in the glacis plate below the gun mount. Impossibly, the American round had defeated the Panther's frontal armour from over 800 meters range. The penetrator had entered the fighting compartment at an oblique angle, struck the transmission casing, and lodged there, glowing red. Had it struck anything else, the crew would be dead, or the ammunition would be cooking off. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The Sherman fired again. This round missed high, passing over the Panther's turret. But now Pfeiffer understood the immediate danger. This was not a standard Sherman. This American tank possessed a gun, capable of defeating Panther armour at combat ranges. Every tactical assumption about American armour superiority had just become invalid. Pfeiffer grabbed the radio, calling to the other Panthers in his platoon. All units break contact immediately. Enemy has new anti-tank capability. Penetrated my frontal armour at 800 meters. I repeat, penetrated frontal glacis. This is not a normal Sherman. All units withdraw to secondary positions. His platoon commander's voice came back skeptical. Confirm penetration. You said frontal glacis? Pfeiffer confirmed. The hole in his armour told the story more clearly than words. The radio went silent for 3 seconds, a lifetime in combat. Then orders came. All Panthers withdraw. Reform at Rally Point Bravo. Avoid engagement with long-gun Shermans until we understand their capability. The Panther reversed, the driver working the gears smoothly, backing the 60-ton vehicle into defilade behind a small rise. The Sherman didn't pursue. Likely the American commander recognized the danger of pressing an attack unsupported. Pfeiffer's crew secured the tank, checked for internal damage beyond the penetration hole. The transmission had survived, protected by its heavy casing. They had been extraordinarily lucky. As the Panther withdrew toward the rally point, Pfeiffer examined the penetration more carefully. The hole was clean, punched straight through armour that should have been immune to any American tank gun in service. The edges showed characteristic deformation from an extremely high-velocity impact. Whatever projectile had done, this travelled significantly faster than standard Sherman ammunition. At the rally point, Pfeiffer reported to his company commander, Hauptmann Dieter Kohl. Kohl examined the damage personally, running his hand along the penetration hole's edge, measuring its diameter. Impossible, Kohl muttered. American tank guns don't have this penetration capability. Our intelligence, said the new 76mm Sherman can't defeat Panther armour frontally. This contradicts everything we know. But the evidence was undeniable. An American Sherman mounting what appeared to be a 76mm gun had defeated a Panther's frontal armour at approximately 800 meters range. Other Panthers in the company reported similar observations. 3 tanks had been struck by high-velocity rounds from long-gun Shermans. 2 penetrations, 1 ricochet. The rounds behaved differently from standard American ammunition. Higher velocity, greater penetrating power. Something fundamental had changed. That evening, intelligence officers from divisional headquarters arrived to photograph Pfeiffer's tank and interview his crew. They brought technical manuals captured earlier in the campaign, documenting American 76mm gun specifications. The weapon fired M62 APC ammunition at approximately 2,600 feet per second muzzle velocity. According to penetration tables, this should penetrate roughly 109 millimeters of vertical armor at 1,000 yards. Against the Panther's sloped glacis, with its extreme angle creating an effective thickness of 140 millimeters or more, penetration should be impossible. The intelligence officers measured the penetration hole precisely, 30 millimeters in diameter, smaller than the 76 millimeter bore. This suggested a sabot round or composite projectile with a sub-caliber penetrator. The Americans had developed something new, something German intelligence had failed to anticipate. Over the following week, reports flooded in from across the front. American tanks mounting long 76 millimeter guns were achieving penetrations against Panther turrets, gun mantlets, and occasionally even frontal hull armor at ranges exceeding 700 meters. Tank destroyers with the same gun, particularly the M18 Hellcat, were proving devastatingly effective. On September 18th alone, M18s from the 704th and 603rd Tank Destroyer Battalions destroyed 8 Panthers during engagements near Lunéville. German records documented no M18 losses in those engagements. The mathematics that had governed armoured combat on the Western Front since Normandy no longer applied. For 3 months, German tank commanders had relied on armour superiority. Panthers and Tigers could engage American Shermans with near impunity at long range. American doctrine compensated through numbers and flanking manoeuvres, accepting higher losses to achieve kills from side or rear angles. Now the Americans possessed a weapon that could fight frontally at combat ranges. The tactical balance had shifted fundamentally. German technical intelligence scrambled to understand what had changed. They knew about the 76 millimeter M1A1 gun. Captured examples had been tested at proving grounds. The standard M62 APCBC ammunition couldn't penetrate Panther frontal armor. Tungsten core ammunition had been discussed as a theoretical possibility, but dismissed as unlikely due to tungsten shortages. The Americans needed tungsten for industrial tooling, aircraft engines, and countless other applications. Diverting strategic tungsten to tank ammunition seemed improbable, but improbable wasn't impossible. The Americans had done it. They had developed and fielded a tungsten core armor-piercing round, designated T4, later standardized as M93 HVAP, hyper-velocity armor-piercing. The round used a tungsten carbide penetrator, surrounded by an aluminum sabot that fell away after leaving the barrel. The tungsten core, only 38 millimeters in diameter, achieved muzzle velocities approaching 3,400 feet per second. At this velocity, the small, dense penetrator could defeat armor that stopped conventional full-caliber projectiles. The discovery represented a strategic intelligence failure of considerable magnitude. American development of HVAP ammunition had proceeded through 1943 and early 1944. Testing occurred at Aberdeen Proving Ground. Production began in July 1944. The first 1,000 rounds were air-shipped to France for field testing in August. By September, limited quantities were reaching frontline units. German intelligence had missed the entire development, production, and initial deployment process. More critically, the intelligence failure meant German tank tactics were based on obsolete assumptions. Panther and Tiger commanders had been trained to engage American armor at long range, relying on superior firepower and protection. This doctrine worked perfectly against 75 millimeter Shermans and remained effective against 76 millimeter Shermans firing standard ammunition. But against HVAP-armed Shermans, German heavy tanks suddenly faced a weapon that could kill them frontally at typical combat ranges. The psychological impact on German tank crews proved as significant as the tactical reality. For the first time since the introduction of heavy armor in late 1942, German tankers faced American opponents who could hurt them frontally. The comfortable superiority they had enjoyed was gone. Every engagement now carried real risk. A Sherman appearing at 800 meters was no longer a target to be leisurely destroyed. It was a threat requiring immediate response and careful tactics. Tank ace Hauptmann Walther Staudegger, who had commanded Tigers on the Eastern Front before transferring west, later testified to American interrogators about the HVAP revelation. When we first encountered this new ammunition in September 1944, we thought it was some kind of mistake, a lucky shot hitting a weak spot. But the reports kept coming. Panthers penetrated frontally. Tigers hit in the turret. The Americans had somehow developed a weapon we thought impossible with their technology base. It changed everything. The timing proved catastrophic for German armoured forces. In September 1944, Germany was already losing the war through attrition. Industrial production couldn't replace tank losses. Fuel shortages limited training and operations. Experienced crews were being killed faster than replacements could be trained. Now, the one advantage German armour retained technical superiority, allowing engagement at longer ranges with better protection, had been partially negated by American technological innovation. German tank production focused on heavily armed designs precisely because lighter tanks couldn't compete in firepower or protection. The Panther weighed 45 tons. The Tiger I weighed 57 tons. The Tiger II, entering service in limited numbers, weighed 69 tons. These massive vehicles were logistical nightmares, consuming fuel at rates that made sustained operations difficult. But they could dominate battlefields through superior firepower and protection. That advantage justified the logistics burden, except now American medium tanks, weighing 33 tons, mounting relatively compact 76mm guns, could achieve kills against German heavy armour when firing special ammunition. The American approach, lighter, faster, more reliable tanks produced in overwhelming numbers combined with technological improvements in ammunition, proved more sustainable than German reliance on heavy armour. The immediate German response focused on tactics. Tank commanders received urgent briefings about the new American ammunition threat. Engagement doctrine changed. Panthers and Tigers were instructed to engage long-gun Shermans immediately upon identification, before the Americans could close to effective HVAP range. German tank platoons adjusted formations to ensure mutual support, with multiple tanks covering each approach to prevent isolated engagements where a single HVAP-armed Sherman might penetrate before being destroyed. These tactical adjustments helped but couldn't solve the fundamental problem. German heavy tanks remained effective weapons. Panthers and Tigers continued achieving favourable kill ratios against American armour throughout the autumn of 1944 and winter of 1945. But the margin of superiority had narrowed. Engagements that would have been one-sided massacres 3 months earlier now carried real risk for German crews. The HVAP ammunition supply remained limited throughout the autumn. Tungsten shortages meant production couldn't meet demand. American units received only small allocations, typically 3 to 5 HVAP rounds per tank. Tank destroyer battalions received priority, with Sherman battalions getting whatever remained. Many Sherman crews never received any HVAP, continuing to rely on standard M62 ammunition and tactical skill to achieve kills against German heavy armour. But even limited HVAP distribution affected German tactical calculations. German tank commanders couldn't know which Shermans carried the deadly ammunition and which carried only standard loads. Every long-gun Sherman had to be treated as a potential HVAP threat. This uncertainty forced conservative tactics, defensive positioning, and reluctance to engage at medium ranges where HVAP proved most effective. Intelligence analysis revealed the scale of American tungsten allocation to armor-piercing ammunition. The United States produced approximately 125,000 tons of tungsten during World War II, mostly from domestic mines or imports from South America and China. Of this, perhaps 2% was allocated to armor-piercing tanks and anti-tank ammunition. This represented approximately 2,500 tons of tungsten, enough to produce perhaps 300,000 HVAP rounds for 76mm and 3-inch guns combined. German tungsten supplies, by comparison, had effectively ceased by late 1944. Tungsten deposits in Spain and Portugal, Germany's primary wartime sources, were now either exhausted or blocked by Allied diplomatic pressure. Germany's own domestic tungsten production was minimal. Whatever tungsten remained in German stocks went to machine tools and industrial applications rather than ammunition. Germany couldn't develop an HVAP equivalent even if the metallurgy and manufacturing processes were available. The Americans had solved a problem through industrial capacity and resource allocation that Germany couldn't match. This pattern repeated across multiple weapon systems. Germany developed technically superior designs but lacked the industrial base and raw materials to produce them in decisive quantities. America developed adequate designs and produced them in overwhelming numbers, then improved them incrementally through ammunition, optics, and tactical doctrine. The Sherman with HVAP ammunition epitomized this approach perfectly. By October 1944, German armored doctrine had adjusted to the new reality. Tank companies operating against American forces received explicit instructions about engaging 76mm Shermans. Hauptmann Kohl's company orders, typical of those issued across Panzer divisions, stated clearly, enemy M4 tanks mounting long 76mm guns are to be considered high-priority threats equivalent to tank destroyers. These vehicles carry limited quantities of hyper-velocity ammunition, capable of penetrating Panther frontal armor at 700 to 800 meters. Engagement at maximum range is mandatory. Under no circumstances allow these vehicles to close below 1,000 meters without engaging with main armament. If penetrated by a suspected hypervelocity round, report immediately to company headquarters with details of range, impact location, and damage assessment. The orders acknowledged what field experience had proven. American technological innovation had created a weapon that, while not superior to German tank guns, was now adequate to compete at combat ranges. Combined with superior American numbers, logistics, air support, and increasingly aggressive tactics, the HVAP-armed Sherman represented a genuine threat that German armor could no longer dismiss. The battle near Arracourt in September 1944, where Pfeiffer's Panther sustained the first HVAP penetration his company had experienced, proved to be the opening engagement of a larger armoured battle that continued for 2 weeks. The 5th Panzer Army launched counterattacks attempting to disrupt the American advance through Lorraine toward the German border. American 3rd Army, including Combat Command A of the 4th Armoured Division, defended against these attacks with a mix of 75mm Shermans, newly arrived 76mm Shermans, and M18 tank destroyer support. The battle statistics told a sobering story. German forces committed approximately 200 Panthers and 140 Panzer IVs to the engagement. American forces fielded approximately 300 Shermans and 100 tank destroyers. Over 2 weeks of intensive fighting, German forces lost between 86 and 115 tanks, depending on how abandonment due to mechanical failure was counted. American forces lost 48 Shermans and 7 tank destroyers. The kill ratio, traditionally favoring German armor by 3-to-1 or better, had collapsed to near parity. Multiple factors contributed to this outcome. American air superiority prevented German maneuver in daylight. American artillery coordination overwhelmed German combined arms integration. American logistics ensured damaged tanks were recovered and repaired, while German tanks abandoned due to fuel shortage or minor mechanical problems were lost permanently. But HVAP ammunition played a documented role. After-action reports from 4th Armoured Division credited HVAP with enabling frontal engagements against Panthers that would have been suicidal with standard ammunition. The Arracourt battles also revealed HVAP's limitations. The ammunition remained in critically short supply. Most Sherman crews received 2 to 4 rounds maximum. Tank destroyer units received slightly better allocation, but still operated under strict ammunition discipline. HVAP was reserved for engaging heavy German armour at medium range. Against lighter targets Panzer IVs, Stug assault guns, Half-Track's standard M62 ammunition proved adequate and was used preferentially to conserve HVAP stocks. Accuracy presented another challenge. HVAP projectiles, with their lightweight aluminum sabots, displayed different ballistic characteristics than standard ammunition. Gunners trained on M62 ballistics found HVAP shot high at ranges beyond 800 meters. Proper range estimation became critical. A round wasted on a miss represented perhaps 25% of a tank's entire HVAP allocation. Crews learned to hold fire until certain of range and target identification, engaging only when confident of a first-round hit. German technical intelligence finally obtained intact HVAP projectiles in mid-October when American ammunition stocks were overrun during a local counterattack. The projectiles were shipped immediately to Kummersdorf, proving grounds near Berlin for examination and testing. German engineers documented every detail: the tungsten carbide core composition, the aluminum sabot design, the propellant charge, the ballistic performance. Testing against captured Sherman armor and German Panther plate confirmed American penetration claims. At 750 meters, HVAP could defeat Panther frontal armor consistently when striking perpendicular to the plate. At angles approaching the Panther's 55-degree glacis slope, penetration became marginal but remained possible. The Tiger I's flatter armor profile made it somewhat more vulnerable. The Tiger II, with even thicker armor and more extreme slopes, remained effectively immune to HVAP at all but point-blank range. The Kummersdorf report concluded with recommendations that were never implemented due to Germany's deteriorating industrial situation. German engineers suggested developing indigenous HVAP equivalents using remaining tungsten stocks, but this proved impossible. They recommended increasing frontal armor thickness on new Panther production, adding applique plates to existing tanks, but steel allocation couldn't support this. They suggested tactical modifications, longer engagement ranges, better camouflage, more aggressive use of combined arms, but fuel shortages and manpower losses made aggressive tactics unsustainable. Germany's responses to American HVAP development revealed how comprehensively the strategic situation had shifted by late 1944. Earlier in the war, Germany had pioneered tungsten core anti-tank ammunition with the PZAGR. 40 rounds for the 75mm and 88mm guns. These had proved devastatingly effective against Soviet armor in 1941 and 42. Now Germany lacked the resources to compete in an ammunition technology race, while America, with effectively unlimited industrial capacity and secure resource supplies, could develop and field improved ammunition types whenever tactical requirements demanded. The introduction of HVAP ammunition represented one piece of a larger pattern. In September 1944, American forces deployed improved M4A3 Shermans with HVSS suspension, providing better cross-country mobility. The M26 Pershing heavy tank, mounting a 90mm high-velocity gun, was in final testing and would reach Europe by February 1945. American close air support coordination had evolved to the point where forward air controllers could direct fighter bombers onto German armor within minutes of identification. American artillery doctrine had perfected time-on-target concentrations that could saturate target areas with overwhelming firepower. Each improvement individually was incremental. Combined, they represented cumulative tactical and technological superiority that German forces could no longer counter effectively. The HVAP ammunition issue exemplified the pattern. German tanks remained technically superior in many respects: better guns, better armor, better optics. But American forces achieved victory through systematic improvement across multiple capabilities, combined with overwhelming material superiority that rendered individual German technical advantages irrelevant. The production statistics for HVAP ammunition revealed the scale of resource constraints America faced, despite overwhelming industrial capacity. In July 1944, the first 1,000 rounds of 76mm T4 HVAP were produced and immediately air-shipped to Europe for field testing. August. Production remained at 1,000 rounds for 3-inch guns, with an additional 1,076mm rounds. By September, production had doubled to 1,000 rounds each for both calibers. The planned target was 43,000 rounds monthly by year's end, then 10,000 rounds per month thereafter. This never materialized. By November 1944, monthly production reached only 5,000 rounds each for 76mm and 3-inch guns. December maintained this level. Not until January 1945 did production increase to 7,000 3-inch and 6,076 mm rounds monthly. The bottleneck was tungsten carbide availability. Each 76 mm HVAP round contained approximately 6 pounds of tungsten carbide in the penetrator core. The 3-inch round used similar quantities. Monthly production of 10,000 rounds required 30 tons of tungsten carbide. This represented a small fraction of total American tungsten consumption, but tungsten allocation prioritized industrial tooling, aircraft engine components, and other applications deemed more critical to overall war production. Tank ammunition, while important, competed against countless other military requirements for limited strategic materials. Shipping delays compounded the supply problem. Standard surface shipping from American factories to European depots required approximately 10 weeks. Production in July meant ammunition wouldn't reach frontline units until late September at earliest. The first 1,000 rounds produced in July were airshipped specifically for testing at Isigny-sur-Mer, arriving in time for evaluation trials in late August. Testing consumed perhaps half the shipment. The remainder was distributed to tank destroyer battalions for immediate combat evaluation. Regular surface shipments began in September, but didn't reach units in meaningful quantities until November. Priority allocation went to tank destroyer battalions. American doctrine assigned tank destroyers the primary mission of engaging enemy armor. The M18 Hellcat tank destroyer, mounting a 76 mm gun on a lightweight chassis capable of 55 miles per hour, received first allocation. The M10 tank destroyer, mounting a 3-inch gun, also received priority. Sherman tank battalions received whatever remained after tank destroyer requirements were satisfied. Through December 1944, most Sherman crews with 76 mm guns never received any HVAP. Those who did typically received 2 to 3 rounds per tank, barely sufficient for testing. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The allocation policy made tactical sense, given doctrinal assumptions. American doctrine designated tanks as exploitation weapons supporting infantry advances. Tank destroyers existed specifically to counter enemy armor. Giving limited HVAP stocks to tank destroyers rather than tanks maximized effectiveness against the primary target, German heavy armor. However, the policy ignored battlefield reality. German Panthers and Tigers engaged American Shermans as frequently as they engaged tank destroyers. Sherman crews facing German heavy armor without adequate ammunition felt understandably frustrated, watching tank destroyer units receive scarce HVAP while they fought with standard ammunition. The September 1944 battles near Arracourt demonstrated both HVAP's effectiveness and the consequences of inadequate supply. The 4th Armoured Division's Combat Command, A, defended against 5th Panzer Army counterattacks, featuring newly formed Panzer brigades equipped predominantly with Panther tanks. German forces committed approximately 262 tanks and assault guns, including 107 Panthers. American Combat Command fielded approximately 70 medium tanks, mostly Shermans with 75 mm guns, though some newly arrived 76 mm variants participated. Tank destroyer support came from the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion equipped with M18 Hellcats. The battle opened September 19th amid heavy morning fog. German Panthers advanced without adequate reconnaissance, having been rushed into combat before achieving full operational readiness. Many crews had minimal training on their vehicles. The Panzer brigades lacked integral reconnaissance units, artillery support, and air cover. They advanced blindly into American defensive positions optimized through weeks of preparation and supported by artillery, pre-positioned to cover all likely avenues of approach. American defenders exploited the fog brilliantly. Sherman platoons positioned on ridge lines waited until German tanks closed to within effective range before engaging. The fog negated the Panther's superior long-range gunnery, forcing combat at distances where even 75 mm Shermans could achieve flank shots against exposed side armor. American commanders used fire and maneuver tactics, with Sherman platoons engaging briefly, then withdrawing to alternate positions, drawing German tanks into kill zones covered by multiple American positions simultaneously. Tank destroyers proved devastatingly effective. M18 Hellcats, faster and more maneuverable than Shermans, raced to threatened positions, engaged at medium range with HVAP when available, then withdrew before German return fire could bracket them. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion's after-action reports credit HVAP ammunition with enabling frontal engagements against Panthers that would have been impossible with standard ammunition. One engagement on September 20th saw 3 M18s destroy 8 Panthers in under 10 minutes, using HVAP at ranges between 700 and 900 meters, then withdraw it without losses. The fog lifted by mid-morning September 19th, allowing American air support to engage. P-47 Thunderbolts from the XIEC Tactical Air Command appeared overhead, armed with rockets and bombs. German tanks, exposed on open ground without air cover, became targets for systematic destruction from above. The combination of ground fire and air attack shattered German formations. By day's end, German forces had lost 43 tanks, mostly Panthers, against American losses of 5 Shermans and 3 tank destroyers. The fighting continued through September 29th. German forces launched repeated attacks, attempting to break through to Lunéville and eliminate American forces east of the Moselle River. Every attack failed. American defenders, now reinforced with additional artillery and tank destroyer units, inflicted catastrophic losses. By September 22nd, the 111th Panzer Brigade had been reduced to combat ineffectiveness. The 113th Panzer Brigade suffered similarly severe losses. Final accounting proved sobering for German forces. Of 262 tanks and assault guns committed to the battle, only 62 remained operational by month's end. 200 tanks had been destroyed or abandoned, representing 76% losses. American 4th Armored Division Combat Command reported 25 Shermans destroyed and 7 tank destroyers lost. The kill ratio, approximately 8 German tanks destroyed for each American tank lost, demolished the conventional wisdom that German heavy armor held overwhelming superiority. Multiple factors contributed to German defeat: inexperienced crews, inadequate combined arms support, poor reconnaissance, American air superiority, and superior American artillery coordination all played decisive roles. But HVAP ammunition, though available in limited quantities, proved its value. Tank destroyer crews who received HVAP could engage Panthers frontally with confidence. Sherman crews with HVAP felt empowered rather than helpless facing superior German armor. The psychological impact of possessing adequate weapons proved as important as the physical capability to penetrate enemy armor. German intelligence analysis after Arracourt focused intently on American ammunition improvements. Interrogation of captured American tank crews revealed that some units had received special high-velocity ammunition capable of penetrating German heavy armor. Examination of destroyed German tanks showed characteristic penetration patterns consistent with subcaliber projectiles traveling at extremely high velocity. German engineers calculated that achieving such penetration required tungsten core ammunition fired at velocities exceeding 3,000 feet per second. The implications disturbed German military leadership. Germany had pioneered tungsten core anti-tank ammunition in the late 1930s with the Panzer Granate 40 series. These rounds had proven devastatingly effective against Soviet armor in 1941 and 42. But tungsten shortages forced Germany to curtail production by 1943. Existing stocks were recalled and held in reserve for critical situations. Most German tank guns now fired only steel core ammunition, which lacked the penetration of tungsten core rounds against heavily armored targets. America, with secure tungsten supplies from China, South America, and domestic sources, could produce tungsten core ammunition throughout the war. While production remained limited compared to standard ammunition, American forces could field HVAP whenever tactically necessary. Germany couldn't compete. This technological and resource imbalance represented another example of America's fundamental advantage: the ability to field adequate solutions to tactical problems through industrial capacity and resource availability that Germany simply couldn't match. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 through January 1945 demonstrated both the continued effectiveness and persistent scarcity of HVAP ammunition. German forces launched their last major Western offensive with approximately 600 tanks, including Panthers, Tigers, and the new Tiger II heavy tanks. American forces defending the Ardennes initially possessed limited HVAP stocks. Tank destroyer battalions had modest allocations. Sherman battalions had virtually none. As the battle developed, emergency ammunition shipments were flown from the United States to forward depots. HVAP received priority alongside other critical munitions. By late December, tank destroyer units defending key positions had increased their HVAP allocation to perhaps 5 rounds per gun. This remained inadequate for sustained combat, but sufficient for engagement against high-priority targets. Sherman units received smaller quantities, typically 2 to 4 rounds per tank, with instructions to conserve HVAP for use only against heavy German armor. Combat reports from the Bulge documented HVAP effectiveness repeatedly. M18 tank destroyers at Bastogne engaged German armor with HVAP, achieving kills against Panthers at ranges approaching 800 meters. M36 tank destroyers, mounting 90mm guns firing 90mm HVAP rounds, proved even more effective. The 90mm HVAP could penetrate Tiger II frontal armor at moderate ranges, providing American forces their first reliable weapon against Germany's heaviest production tank. But scarcity remained chronic. Tank destroyer crews reported running out of HVAP during extended engagements, forcing them to revert to standard ammunition and accept significantly reduced effectiveness. Sherman crews with 76mm guns experienced similar frustration. The few HVAP rounds allocated to each tank were expended within minutes of engagement against German heavy armor, leaving crews dependent on tactical maneuver and numerical superiority for the remainder of combat operations. German tank commanders adapted to the HVAP threat through modified tactics. Intelligence briefings warned all Panzer units about American hypervelocity ammunition. Instructions emphasized maintaining maximum engagement range when possible, avoiding static positions where American tank destroyers could achieve aimed shots, and concentrating fire to eliminate identified HVAP-armed vehicles immediately. These tactics helped but couldn't overcome Germany's deteriorating strategic position. By January 1945, fuel shortages limited German armor operations more severely than American ammunition technology. The broader strategic picture revealed that HVAP ammunition, while tactically significant, represented only one element of American material superiority. By late 1944, American forces in Europe fielded overwhelming advantages across multiple categories. Artillery ammunition expenditure exceeded German capacity by factors of 5 to 1 or greater. American air forces flew thousands of sorties daily, while the Luftwaffe managed only hundreds. American logistics could sustain offensive operations across broad fronts, while German forces struggled to maintain defensive positions due to fuel and ammunition shortages. American tank production exemplified this industrial dominance. In 1944, American factories produced approximately 17,000 Sherman tanks. German industry produced approximately 5,800 Panther and Tiger tanks combined. American industry could replace losses indefinitely while maintaining numerical superiority. German industry, despite heroic efforts under Albert Speer's reorganization, could barely replace losses. Every German tank destroyed represented an irreplaceable loss. Every American tank destroyed would be replaced within weeks, often days. The tungsten allocation issue illustrated American decision-making priorities. Despite HVAP's proven effectiveness, American ordnance officers never allocated sufficient tungsten to maximize HVAP production. Tungsten remained allocated primarily to industrial tooling, which enabled mass production of conventional ammunition, vehicles, aircraft, and countless other war materials. This decision made strategic sense. Producing millions of standard armor-piercing rounds, plus modest HVAP quantities, provided better overall capability than producing maximum HVAP at the expense of reduced total ammunition production. German strategic planning, conversely, prioritized technical excellence over sustainable production. The Panther tank exemplified this philosophy. The vehicle mounted an excellent gun, carried heavy armor, and performed superbly in individual combat. But manufacturing complexity limited production rates. Mechanical reliability problems plagued the design throughout its service life. Most critically, the Panther's fuel consumption restricted operational radius to levels that made sustained mobile operations impossible under combat conditions, where fuel supply faced constant interdiction. The post-war analysis, conducted by American and British military historians, examined the tank versus tank combat statistics comprehensively. Data compiled from unit records, battlefield surveys, and interrogations revealed nuanced conclusions that challenged both contemporary assumptions and post-war myths. The simplistic narrative that German tanks held overwhelming superiority proved false. The equally simplistic counter-narrative that American tanks were adequate proved incomplete. The truth resided in complexity. German heavy tanks possessed genuine technical advantages in armor protection and gun performance. Panthers and Tigers could engage effectively at longer ranges than Shermans. Frontal engagements heavily favored German armor. However, combat occurred in contexts where technical superiority alone couldn't determine outcomes. Terrain, weather, training combined, arms integration, logistics, intelligence, and tactical leadership all influenced results more significantly than individual vehicle performance specifications. American forces compensated for technical disadvantages through systematic advantages in every supporting category. American tank crews received better training than late-war German crews. American combined arms doctrine integrated infantry, artillery, air support, and armor more effectively than German doctrine managed given resource constraints. American logistics ensured continuous supply, while German logistics collapsed under Allied air interdiction and diminishing resources. American intelligence gathering provided better battlefield awareness than German intelligence, which increasingly operated blind due to Allied air superiority and signals intelligence dominance. HVAP ammunition fit into this larger pattern. The ammunition provided American forces a technological solution to a specific tactical problem: inadequate penetration against German heavy armor. But the solution came late, arrived in limited quantities, and required careful allocation to maximize effectiveness. Despite these constraints, HVAP proved its value repeatedly. Tank destroyer crews and Sherman crews who received HVAP could engage German heavy armor with confidence rather than desperation. This psychological advantage mattered as much as the physical capability. The German response to HVAP revealed their declining capacity for adaptation. Early in the war, Germany had demonstrated remarkable ability to innovate tactically and technologically in response to Allied threats. By late 1944, this capacity had evaporated. German engineers understood the HVAP threat but couldn't develop countermeasures. Increasing armor thickness required steel allocations that didn't exist. Improving engine power to move heavier armored vehicles required development time and resources Germany couldn't spare. Developing indigenous HVAP equivalents required tungsten Germany no longer possessed. The ammunition technology race exemplified how wars are won through sustainable systems rather than brilliant individual solutions. Germany developed the Panzer 40 tungsten core ammunition before America developed HVAP. German 88mm guns firing Panzer 40 could penetrate any Allied tank frontally at extreme ranges. This technological advantage helped Germany achieve early victories in North Africa and on the Eastern Front. But when tungsten supplies diminished, Germany couldn't sustain production. The advantage disappeared. America developed HVAP later but could sustain production indefinitely. While monthly output remained modest compared to standard ammunition, American forces never faced the prospect of completely running out. The supply might be inadequate for every tactical requirement, but it never disappeared entirely. This sustainability, enabled by secure resource supplies and overwhelming industrial capacity, proved more valuable strategically than early technological leadership. The final accounting of American 76mm HVAP production through the end of the European War totaled approximately 50,000 rounds, a minuscule quantity compared to millions of standard armor-piercing rounds produced, but sufficient to influence tactical outcomes at critical moments. The 50,000 rounds represented perhaps 300 tons of tungsten carbide allocated to this specific application. That same tungsten could have produced machine tools, industrial dyes, cutting implements, and countless other applications supporting the broader war effort. American strategists chose to allocate 300 tons specifically to tank ammunition because tactical requirements demanded it. The broader lesson transcended tank warfare specifically. Modern industrialized warfare requires balancing countless competing requirements for limited resources, even when those resources appear abundant. Steel production has limits. Tungsten supplies face constraints. Factory capacity can't expand infinitely. Transport ships sail at fixed speeds regardless of urgency. Every allocation decision involves trade-offs, where maximizing one capability necessarily reduces another. The side that manages these trade-offs most effectively typically wins. American management of the HVAP allocation problem demonstrated institutional competence at this strategic balancing. HVAP production remained limited but never stopped. Allocation prioritized units most likely to engage German heavy armor. Distribution reached frontline units in time to influence critical battles. The system wasn't perfect. Countless tank crews felt underserved, but the system functioned adequately to achieve strategic objectives without wasting resources on over-allocation that would have weakened other capabilities. German management of equivalent problems revealed institutional breakdown by late 1944. Tungsten allocation stopped entirely for ammunition. Fuel allocation couldn't sustain operations. Spare parts production lagged far behind requirements. Training programs collapsed under time pressure and fuel shortages. Every system faced a crisis simultaneously, creating cascading failures where each weakness amplified others. German forces retained individual excellence, skilled tank commanders, effective tactics, superior equipment when it functioned but couldn't sustain coordinated operations at the scale modern warfare demanded. The experience of Oberleutnant Hans Pfeiffer, whose Panther had been penetrated by HVAP near Lunéville in September, illustrated how individual German soldiers experienced this systemic collapse. After repairs, Pfeiffer's tank returned to service in October. His company participated in defensive operations throughout autumn, retreating gradually before American advances. Fuel shortages meant his Panther sat, immobile for days at a time, despite being mechanically functional. Ammunition allocation declined monthly. Spare parts became unobtainable. His crew's diet deteriorated as logistics collapsed. Reinforcements arrived poorly trained. Pfeiffer survived the war, surrendered to American forces in April 1945, and spent 2 years in prisoner of war camps before repatriation to Germany. In post-war interviews, he emphasized that the Panther remained an excellent tank, superior in most respects to the Sherman. But excellence meant nothing when the tank couldn't move due to fuel shortage, couldn't fight due to ammunition shortage, and couldn't be maintained due to parts shortage. "We had the better weapon," Pfeiffer stated, "but they had everything else. The better weapon alone couldn't win." This observation captured the essential truth about armoured warfare in World War II's final year. Technical superiority in individual weapons systems, tanks, guns, ammunition mattered far, less than systemic superiority across all dimensions of military capability. The Sherman tank with HVAP ammunition wasn't superior to the Panther. The Sherman remained more vulnerable, less heavily armed, and less well protected. But American forces fielding Shermans with modest HVAP allocation, supported by overwhelming artillery, dominant air power, reliable logistics, and competent combined arms doctrine defeated German forces fielding Panthers and Tigers consistently. The legacy of HVAP development influenced post-war American tank design profoundly. Engineers recognized that ammunition technology could extend weapon system effectiveness more readily than designing entirely new vehicles. The 90mm gun fitted to the M26 Pershing heavy tank, and later the M46 Patton medium tank, received extensive ammunition development. HVAP variants, improved armor-piercing capped ballistic cap rounds, high-explosive anti-tank rounds. Each ammunition type extended the gun's tactical flexibility and effectiveness against evolving targets. This design philosophy continued through subsequent generations. The 105mm gun that armed American main battle tanks from the M60 through early M1 Abrams variants could fire multiple ammunition types developed across decades. Armor-piercing, fin-stabilized discarding sabot rounds using depleted uranium penetrators represented the ultimate evolution of the HVAP concept, dense sub-caliber penetrators, achieving extreme velocity through sabots that separated after leaving the barrel. The fundamental principle remained unchanged from 76mm HVAP developed 80 years earlier. Modern ammunition technology has achieved penetration capabilities that would have seemed impossible to World War II-era engineers. Depleted uranium penetrators fired at velocities exceeding 5,000 feet per second can defeat armor thickness measured in multiple feet of steel equivalent. The physics remain identical: concentrate kinetic energy into the smallest possible area delivered at maximum velocity. But materials science, propellant chemistry, and manufacturing precision have advanced tremendously, enabling performance levels unimaginable in 1944. The human dimension of the HVAP story deserves remembrance alongside the technical and strategic elements. Thousands of American tank crews faced German heavy armor with inadequate weapons through summer and autumn 1944. They watched their shells bounce off Panther glacis plates, while German rounds penetrated Sherman armor with horrifying ease. They fought anyway, using courage, tactical skill, and numerical superiority to overcome technical disadvantage. Many died in burning tanks, killed by weapons against which they had insufficient defense. When HVAP ammunition finally reached these crews, even in limited quantities, it represented more than improved penetration capability. It represented institutional recognition that their concerns mattered, that their survival warranted resource allocation, that the system would provide tools adequate to their mission. The psychological impact of receiving effective ammunition proved as important as the tactical capability it provided. Crews with HVAP fought more aggressively, engaged more confidently, and achieved better results than when fighting without adequate weapons. The German tank crews who encountered HVAP-armed American tanks experienced the inverse psychological effect. For months, they had relied on armor superiority to survive engagements. Panthers and Tigers could engage at long range with minimal risk from return fire. This advantage encouraged aggressive tactics. Then suddenly, without warning, American tanks could penetrate German armor frontally. The comfortable superiority evaporated. Every engagement now carried real risk. The psychological shift toward caution and defensive posturing followed inevitably. This psychological dimension of weapons, technology deserves greater recognition in military history. Technical specifications, armor thickness, muzzle velocity, penetration at range provide objective measures of capability, but human reactions to weapons technology shape battlefield outcomes as significantly as engineering specifications. Crews fighting with confidence achieve better results than crews fighting with fear, regardless of equivalent equipment. The side that maintains morale advantage through providing adequate weapons and demonstrating institutional competence typically performs better than equivalent forces, suffering morale disadvantage through inadequate equipment and institutional failure. The story of HVAP ammunition and the Sherman 76mm gun exemplifies these broader themes. The weapon system itself was adequate rather than exceptional. The ammunition technology was evolutionary rather than revolutionary. The deployment came late and in limited quantities. Despite these limitations, HVAP proved decisive at critical moments because it arrived when needed, reached units who required it most urgently, and functioned reliably under combat conditions. This combination of adequate technology, competent distribution, and reliable performance characterized American weapons development throughout World War II. Germany's failure to develop equivalent capabilities, despite pioneering the technology, illustrated how rapidly technological advantage can evaporate without sustainable industrial support. Germany led in tungsten core ammunition development, but couldn't maintain production when resources dwindled. Germany designed superior tanks, but couldn't produce them in decisive quantities. Germany developed advanced weapons systems across multiple categories, but couldn't sustain them operationally. Technical excellence without systemic sustainability equals strategic failure. World War II demonstrated this principle repeatedly across every domain of warfare. The veteran tank, crews who fought these battles, American and German alike, understood these realities instinctively. They recognized that courage and skill mattered but couldn't overcome inadequate weapons and failed logistics. They watched brilliant tactical victories become irrelevant when fuel ran out or ammunition couldn't reach forward positions. They experienced how material superiority compounds through cascading advantages, while material disadvantage spirals through cascading failures. The crews who survived carried these lessons forward, shaping post-war military development through their testimony and experience. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.